The National Desk, America's News, now.
The Supreme Court issued a fresh batch of decisions today, but it's a newly leaked ruling grabbing headlines just 2 years after the High Court suffered one of the worst breaches of trust in history. Severe weather alerts for more than a third of the country as flooding and heat warnings continue. Who is under alert right now? And then
we are imposing stricter consequences for those who cross the border without authorization. These actions are changing the calculus for those considering crossing our border.
Illegal crossings trending down, but concerns of border security remain high. Why the recent improvement isn't enough for Biden's top critics. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Amira David. For the second time in 2 years, an opinion leaked of a major abortion rights ruling from the Supreme Court. Tonight, we are learning more about the ruling briefly posted that shows the court is poised to force Idaho to allow emergency abortions. And it comes 2 years after the High Court had a similar situation, suffering one of the worst breaches of trust in history when a leak showed the court would overturn Roe versus Wade and effectively end the right to abortions. The court failed despite an investigation to determine who leaked that document. Let's get right to the National Desk's Matt Gelka.
The Supreme Court's website briefly posted a document apparently allowing abortions for medical emergencies to proceed before taking it down. Bloomberg News reports it reviewed a copy of the document before it was removed, where a majority of justices agreed to dismiss the appeal. The case comes out of Idaho, where there's a strict abortion ban, except if a pregnant woman's life is at risk. The Biden administration argued Idaho's law goes against a broader federal statute protecting a patient's health. A lower court sided with the Biden administration, and if the Bloomberg reporting is accurate, the Supreme Court would allow a lower court's ruling to stand and emergency abortions to proceed. It would be a win for abortion rights advocates for now, pending further legal action. Justices can tweak an opinion up until its official release. A court spokesperson acknowledged the document was inadvertently uploaded, but an opinion has not yet been officially released. The court is set to release more rulings Thursday and Friday. For the National Desk in Washington, I'm Matt Gelka.
Meantime, in another major SCOTUS ruling, the High Court has said the White House and federal agencies such as the FBI may continue to urge social media platforms to take down content the government views as misinformation. The 6-3 decision stemmed from a lawsuit from officials in 2 states who argued the collaboration on topics like vaccines and the pandemic was an overreach and infringed on First Amendment rights. The court rejected the suit, handing a victory to the Biden administration ahead of the election. And right now, a line of severe storms from New Orleans, Louisiana, all the way up to Syracuse, New York, making their way east across the United States. Throughout today, as these storms progressed over the Midwest, nearly 114 million Americans have been or will be in the path of severe storm alerts. This threat will continue through the night, through the Appalachian states to the early morning hours on the East Coast. Meanwhile, the partial failure of the Rapidan Dam in Minnesota caused a nearby house to collapse right into the river. You saw it there. Water surging past the failed dam on the Blue Earth River, causing severe erosion, eating away at the ground under this home. The family had evacuated, so no one was home at the time, thankfully. Authorities today, they say they expect water levels in the Minnesota River to recede 3 to 5 feet in the next few days, but are still monitoring the situation. Nearly 60 million Americans also dealing with the heat wave that has covered most of the United States over the past 2 weeks. At least 11 states have had heat advisories in effect, with excessive heat warnings in California, Oklahoma, and northern Texas. As the heat persists, the number of people going to the emergency room is spiking. According to the CDC, hospitals in more than 24 states are reporting extremely high rates of heat-related emergencies, in most cases due to heat exhaustion. New tonight, Robert Crimo III, accused of killing 7 people and wounding several others at a 2022 4th of July parade in Illinois, rejected a deal to plead guilty. Had he accepted the plea, he would have been ordered to a natural life in prison sentence. Family members of victims were in court and expressed dismay and heartbreak that there is no closure yet. A trial is scheduled to begin next February. Meantime, in Minnesota, we know of 5 people who've been charged with attempting to bribe a juror in a $40 million fraud case. Among those charged today is a man who was acquitted in that trial. 2 of his co-defendants who were found guilty are also charged with attempted bribery. The other 2 today were not previously on trial and are implicated. Earlier this month, just before closing arguments were made in that fraud case, a woman dropped off a bag containing around $120,000 at a juror's home and said there would be more if the juror would acquit all 7 defendants. That juror was removed from the case, and eventually 5 of the 7 on trial were found guilty. There are hundreds of thousands of open cybersecurity jobs across the United States. That's according to the federal government. Experts warn this creates real vulnerabilities for the country's ability to defend against a cyber attack from a foreign adversary, a threat the Federal Reserve saw firsthand this week. The National Desk's Atrel Nashar reports from Washington.
A cyber scare for the nation's financial system. Earlier this week, Russia-based ransomware group Lockbit claimed it obtained 33 terabytes of banking information. Thankfully, their ransom deadline came and went without a massive release of data. The Federal Reserve did not respond to our request for information as of airtime, but Fed Chair Jerome Powell has called cyber attacks the biggest risk for the global financial system, specifically one that shuts down payment processing.
It's day by day. I mean, the attackers are always improving their game, and the defenders have to be improving their game all the time.
That requires filling the more than 500,000 open cybersecurity positions across the U.S. On Capitol Hill, it's being compared to the country's need for troops in World Wars I and II.
We find ourselves in a similar moment today. We need Americans in critical areas like cloud computing, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and zero trust.
Back then, posters like this helped recruitment. This time, it's more complicated. Some of the main hurdles for filling government cyber jobs: federal cybersecurity pay isn't high enough to compete with the private sector. Federal agencies' preference for 4-year degrees over real-world experience, narrowing the pool of job candidates, and federal hiring is a notoriously slow process. Meanwhile, America's adversaries have a head start. According to the FBI, cyber hackers from China outnumber all of the Bureau's cyber personnel by at least 50 to 1.
The PRC has made it clear that it considers every sector that makes our society run fair game in its bid to dominate on the world stage.
Now, the Biden administration recently announced an overhaul to the federal hiring process for technical positions so that it will be skills-based and not just focused on degrees.
And not sure what's been done to ramp up cyber education, because we know that's needed as well.
Yeah, the building blocks before anyone could be a cyber professional, you've got to have some kind of education. So last summer, we saw the White House launch what it calls the National Cyber Workforce and Education Strategy. That starts as early as elementary school, teaching kids digital literacy and basic computing. And we are really already seeing a lot of universities and private sector players take similar initiatives, because not only is it smart for national security, Amira, but companies see it as a smart business move to invest in cyber education.
Indeed, you've got to start as early as possible. Live from Washington, D.C., Atrel Nashar, thank you so much for that report. Trial has begun for jailed American reporter Evan Gershkovich in Russia. Video from before the proceedings began showed the Wall Street Journal reporter with a shaved head, though still appearing healthy behind a glass cell. The 32-year-old was arrested and charged with spying last year with allegations that he had been collecting secret defense and military information. The Wall Street Journal and the U.S. government have denied those accusations. The trial could last months, and if he is convicted, he faces up to 20 years in prison. Meantime, controversial WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, who just pleaded guilty to an espionage charge by the United States, officially a free man and now back in his home country of Australia. His arrival coming just a day after he accepted a plea deal for unlawfully disseminating secret U.S. national security information in exchange for time served, ending a 14-year legal saga. The 52-year-old was facing life in prison, which rights advocates argued set a worrying precedent for others working in the field of journalism. On X, WikiLeaks posting a picture of Assange with the words, "Free at last." It is now up to the federal government to investigate the potential fraud that almost led to the sale of Graceland. The Tennessee Attorney General turned the case over, saying federal law enforcement was better suited to handle the case. Elvis Presley's granddaughter, actress Riley Keough, sued last month to stop the foreclosure of the famous landmark, saying the investment group seeking the sale presented fraudulent documents, saying the family signed a deed of trust as security for a $3.8 million loan. President Biden is pardoning what's believed to be thousands of former U.S. service members convicted of violating a military ban on consensual gay sex. The law was on the books since 1951, but rewritten in 2013 to only ban forced acts. The members being pardoned will have their convictions erased and be able to petition to upgrade their military discharges and recover lost pay and benefits. We are now just about 24 hours away from the start of the first presidential debate of the 2024 election season. Most adults say they plan to tune in. That's according to a new Associated Press poll. Americans remain very divided on the choice at hand, and new data suggests it is putting a stress on their relationships and their social circles. The National Desk's Stephanie Valderrama takes a look at how politics is playing a role in mental health.
How much stress do you think it causes you, like, day in and day out?
My family is very divided, and so we can't talk about it at all, and that puts a real stress on my relationships with my family and my friends.
Associate Professor Stephen Neely tells CBS 12 News about 2/3 of the 1,500 people that took part in a new survey conducted by USF says the current political climate is a source of stress. Just over 1/3 admitted to losing their tempers over politics or admitted to their political beliefs, leading to conflicts with family or friends. Have you gotten into any arguments with family or friends over politics?
No.
Have you gotten into like any fights with family members or friends over politics?
Definitely some heated discussions. Definitely, yeah.
Have you gotten into fights or disagreements with family members or friends over politics?
No.
No?
No. All my family members is what I call the right side.
In order for society to function, people of different political views have to find common ground and work together. But that's the opposite of what Neely discovered through this survey.
They increasingly don't like one another as people, which is very problematic for a lot of reasons.
Another shocking discovery, about 15% of people surveyed say politics is causing them to lose sleep. Now, in Neely's opinion, the lack of sleep combined with the stress and anxiety of the political climate will contribute to the growing mental health crisis.
And we're really encouraging people to the extent we can, it's okay to do a digital detox. It's okay to stay off social media for a while. It's okay to not worry about trying to convince other people that your position is right. It doesn't matter. Those conversations almost never lead to anything fruitful, but they can lead to some very destructive things for your health.
And coming up, asylum processing at the border was suspended 3 weeks ago. The change in illegal crossings that's happened since then. Then deadly waters, the open water phenomenon that's claimed the lives of at least 7 Florida visitors in just the last week. And later, a sculpture outside a D.C. school commemorates Abraham Lincoln, the recent event that left him without a head. We'll tell you about it on the other side. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas says since President Joe Biden's executive order on asylum rules 3 weeks ago, arrests for illegal border crossings have dropped more than 40%. This comes as a debate over tightening the border heats up following the murder of a 12-year-old in Texas. Here's national correspondent Kayla Gaskins with more.
The illegal Venezuelan migrants accused of murdering 12-year-old Jocelyn Nungare in Houston, Texas, appearing in court Tuesday. The judge saying he wants both to face justice here in the United States. The death penalty has not been ruled out.
This shouldn't have happened. This shouldn't have happened to her or any child.
Her mom calling for tighter borders.
We have to have more reinforcement when it comes to letting people in. This is not okay.
New Customs and Border Protection numbers reported by Fox News show so far for fiscal year 2024, 13,000 criminals have been caught at the border, compared with just over 4,000 criminals in 2019. Many of those recently apprehended were convicted of serious crimes like assault, battery, domestic violence, homicide, and sexual offenses. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas addressing concerns Wednesday.
The safety and security of the American public is indeed our highest priority.
The secretary pushing back when questioned about new reports that 400 individuals recently crossed illegally through ISIS-linked smuggling networks, raising concerns over national security. NBC News crediting the information to DHS officials.
That reporting is incorrect.
We spoke with Republican Congressman Randy Weber, who represents the outskirts of Houston, where Nungare died.
Like a lot of people, I'm just outraged at why this is allowed to keep going. Why the open border is not a priority for Joe Biden, I don't get it at all.
Democrats like Jim Costa from California agree changes must be made.
Border security is a problem, and it has been not only in the last 3 years, but I would submit to you for decades.
Where the two sides disagree is on how to solve the problem. Voters continue to rank immigration and border security among the top issues. It's expected to be hotly discussed in the very first presidential debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins reporting for the National Desk, America's News Now.
Kayla, thank you. The Biden administration is trying to lower medication costs, announcing today a plan to add inflation penalties to 64 prescription drugs in the third quarter. This will reduce prices for some Medicare recipients. The drugs treat things like cancer, certain infections, and osteoporosis. The administration says drug companies raised prices faster than the inflation rate. Smoked salmon sold in 15 states is being recalled because of possible listeria contamination. It's the toast-sized Foppen smoked Norwegian salmon slices sold at Kroger and Payless grocery stores. The recalled products were in 8.1-ounce packages with lot number 412. Listeriosis can cause symptoms like fever and muscle aches, but can also become severe. 12 jurors get to decide if the NFL owes up to $21 billion for violating antitrust laws as jury deliberation has begun. Attorneys for almost 2.5 million NFL Sunday ticket subscribers say the sports giant did not offer competitive pricing for out-of-market games, as well as marking up prices for games that were featured on CBS and Fox between 2011 and 2022. But the judge tabled a motion from the NFL to dismiss the case yesterday until after the verdict, meaning he could overrule the jury if he believes the plaintiffs failed to prove their case. The union representing most behind-the-scenes movie and TV employees has reached a tentative agreement with the studios, averting another major strike in the industry. The International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees told its roughly 50,000 members the 3-year deal includes the pay increases and AI protections they'd wanted. The members still need to approve the deal. With the high heat across the country, more and more families are running to cool down at local beaches. But it's been a deadly few days in the water as we track more cases of people drowning in rip currents. In your health alert, the National Desk's Angela Brown speaks with a mom turning tragedy into triumph on her mission to educate.
Deadly days in the water. 7 people died in rip currents over 4 days in Florida. Eric Hyten, the warning coordination meteorologist with the National Weather Service in Newport.
It's extremely important that you know the forecast before you go to the beach. If it's a red flag day, you really shouldn't be in the water.
Watching these tragedies unfold is Karen Cohn, a Connecticut mom living with the pain of losing her child in the water.
We lost our 6-year-old son, Zachary, in a pool drain entrapment in our backyard pool.
Loss that led Karen and her husband to start the Zach Foundation, partnering with the Boys and Girls Club.
We have worked with them to try and target the populations that have the highest drowning rates.
Running Zach camps for young children nationwide, teaching water safety basics, including what to do in a rip current.
You're going to swim parallel to shore and not swim against those rip tides.
Noah Jinks describes how to escape a rip current, stay afloat, yell for help, swim parallel to the shore, do not exhaust yourself fighting the current. Karen has one more piece of advice.
What we're trying to encourage families is to make sure that when they go to open water, that they are swimming where lifeguards are located.
The latest numbers from the National Weather Service says that 19 people have died due to rip currents this year, and roughly 100 people drown from rip currents each year, according to the U.S. Life Saving Association. In Washington, D.C., I'm Angela Brown.
Angela, thank you. And coming up, with the summer season, inevitably comes the bugs. An expert shares tips for deterring those pesky nuisances right after this. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering the issues that matter most to you. We're taking the pulse of America. When the D.C. area reached 100 degrees this past weekend, one of the country's leaders paid the price. A wax sculpture of Abraham Lincoln in Northwest D.C., placed outside of Garrison Elementary School, began to melt from the high temperatures, causing the head to just fall right off. School leaders then took the head to be repaired.
Went outside and I looked on it and there was no roads between us and there, and I thought, uh-oh, this is bad.
People in multiple parts of Palermo and Oroville evacuated their homes Monday evening after the fire tore through a section of Butte County. Crews began direct force against the fire using bulldozers, hose lays, and overhead equipment. CAL FIRE reported the flames were at a dangerous rate of spread Monday night. Two evacuees who wanted to remain anonymous, talking about their up-close encounter with the fire and crews.
So it was probably 300 yards from our house, and
it jumped.
Then it started going the other way, and it jumped and it went through the whole valley right behind our house. So when I walked outside, as soon as it started, I looked up and the spotter plane is directly over our house. I go, okay, this ain't good.
'Tis the season of long days, warm temperatures, and unfortunately bugs. But thankfully, there are some easy tips to mitigate those creepy crawlers from sneaking inside.
So you want to make sure their breeding areas or where they're going to lay eggs aren't going to be around. So if you have like a gutter that has a standing pipe, or if you have gutters on your house that the water is just sitting, those are going to be high prime areas for those mosquitoes and other flying insects to lay their eggs.
The remedy could start with all-natural pesticides like cedarwood, lemon seed, or soybean oil. These could even be sprayed on your pets, causing no harm to them, ourselves, nor your plants. Another key is simply keeping the yard cleaned up. Those areas of leaf debris could be breeding grounds for those flying pests, but also for grubs, which typically come out in earnest the second half of summer.
Well, coming up, the futuristic technology that's taking telehealth to the next level. Taking telehealth to the next level, a hospital just outside of Dallas, Texas, could be the first in the country to have doctors virtually visit with a patient via a hologram. Using a holobox designed by the Dutch company Holonex, Crescent Regional Hospital will allow patients to interact live with a doctor who will be 30 miles away at a local clinic. The patient will see up to an 86-inch display that could be live or recorded. The holobox was on display this year at the South by Southwest exhibits and is operational for anyone with electricity and a functional internet connection, a sign of the times for sure. That does it for this edition of the National Desk. We invite you to join us again this evening for more coverage on America's top stories. Have a wonderful night.